Welcome back. All right, so today we're going to discuss the Edmonton Oilers. I intentionally delayed this one a bit. That was the 1st of June. It's been a few days now since the Oilers got knocked out, about a week. And we're in a situation where the Edmonton Oilers, once again, look good during the regular season, go into the postseason, and then it's a no. The same thing happened last year. They had a really good regular season last year. Then there was the pause, then they came back, and then Chicago knocked them out. They didn't make it to round one. So this team's record this year, 35-19-2. And so you can look at that record and you can say, well, that's because they played against weak teams in the North. Okay, if you and that's again, that's if you feel that the teams in Canada were weaker. But then they got knocked out by one of the Canadian teams in the first round. So, and getting swept by Winnipeg, they were close. Every game in that series was close. 3 of them in extra time, and one of them, while the score was 4-1, 2 of those goals were empty netters. And it was tied going into the third in that game. So it's not like the Oilers got their doors blown off, and that's the problem. See, that's the dilemma facing the Edmonton Oilers. Good regular season team. A lot of players progressed this season and got better. And overall, the picture's not as bad as that sweep in the first round may look. But it's a sweep in the first round. It's another early exit. So you don't have that long playoff run to really spur you on. But you also don't have a bad regular season team. See, out in Vancouver here, we're way ahead. We just have the bad regular season team, so everybody knows there needs to be changes. Sometimes the most tricky part of being a general manager is taking a team that's pretty good and making them an actual contender. And I think that when you get swept in the first round, it's hard to argue you're a cup contender. So their power play and penalty kill in the regular season compared to the playoffs tells a large story here of how well the Winnipeg Jets changed the narrative. 27.59% on the power play in the regular season. In the playoffs, 18.2%. Penalty kill in the regular season, 82.47%. In the playoffs, 70%. These numbers add up to 88.2 in the playoffs. In the regular season, they're what? Above 100 and they're about 110. So that shows you right there was a huge, just absolute meltdown in that first round in terms of their special teams. Their special teams were not good enough. And so for Ken Holland, he has to figure out how to fix this. Or does he throw his arms in the air and go, you know what, this year was unique, it was different. That matchup with Winnipeg just didn't work for us. But we look pretty good. We think next year in the Pacific we'll probably be top 2. And realistically, you can look at the Pacific for next year as the rosters stand right now and say, yeah, Edmonton could look at probably being number 2 behind Vegas. But they want to be gunning for number 1, right? So in the offseason, they have some decisions to make. Now, they do have $22 million in cap space, but they have a lot of players with expiring contracts. So that cap space could get eaten up quickly. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, word has it that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins contract negotiations are not going fantastically, swimmingly with the Oilers. So if that becomes a problem, right? Alex Chason, depth player. They would need to replace him. Tyler Ennis, same thing. Gaetan Haas, Joakim Nygard. I think Haas and Nygard probably stick around. But I don't know. I don't know what they're looking for in terms of a role going forward. And I don't know what the Oilers would be offering them either. And then on the blue line, this is where it gets expensive. So let's just say Nugent-Hopkins comes in at $5 million. You're down to $17 million. Adam Larson, word has it, they were closing in on an extension for like 4 years at $5 million per, somewhere in that region. Takes another $5 million off of that. That disappears quickly, right? And Tyson Barrie. Tyson Barrie is the ultimate variable here. Tyson Barrie had, by all accounts, a really good regular season. And then in the postseason, not as much. So is Tyson Barrie a guy that you want to give big money to stick around with the Oilers? Do you offer maybe a little bit less than he might get on the market and say, look, you take a little bit less, we're able to keep a better team around you and build things up? Or do you let him hit the market and then Jim Benning picks him up and then I get a headache? So, Tyson Barrie will be a very interesting one to watch because, again, you look at his numbers, it's indisputable that he would deserve a raise over what he made this year. But if you're going to argue playoff performance, I'm not sure how you go about that. It's not going to be an easy summer. Dmitry Kulikov, good pickup, likely just a rental, right? Slater Cuckoo, likely on his way out too. And again, you've got guys like Evan Bouchard coming in. You've got other defensemen coming in, young defensemen. But you need to make sure you still have the veterans to shepherd them along, right? And of course, Mike Smith is a pending UFA, and Ken Holland has already said he's interested in bringing Smith back. And there are some Oiler fans who would absolutely welcome Smith back, and there are others who would say, this guy's 39. We need to get that younger goaltender. We don't have. They don't have a young goaltender that they seem to have a lot of faith in right now who's NHL ready. The pending RFAs, Jujhar Khaira, I would think they qualify him. They could probably keep him around. Dominic Cahoon, it was kind of a miss with Dominic Cahoon throughout the year. Didn't really hit the way it was expected. That it was supposed to be this great bargain contract, and they'll put him with Draisaitl, and it's going to be magic, and it never really worked out. Kyler Yamamoto, he'll get a raise. How much? That's the big question mark. And Devon Shore, who was useful, good penalty killer. Probably they can keep him around on a cheap contract. Again, $22 million in space, but they have a lot to figure out. A lot. 22 and under, Jesse Puljujarvi, who had a good season. I don't know if it was a great season, though. And again, with Puljujarvi and there's Kyler Yamamoto, 22 and under, what is their ceiling? What's expected of them next year? And the answer to those questions may very well decide what Ken Holland does from here. Because you need to improve the depth. You cannot just be relying on Draisaitl and McDavid. You need to have them on separate lines. You have to have them on separate lines to really maximize your return on your investment in them and just on the team in general. They're great together. They had great numbers together this year. Absolutely agree. But you need to be able to have them separate so that there's more than one line that the other team has to worry about. Evan Bouchard, I think he breaks through. I think he's a regular next year. Ryan McLeod, same thing. Probably a regular next year. What's the upside with him? How much could Ryan McLeod reaching that next level offset losing a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins? They're both named Ryan, so that's got to help, right? And there's Ryan Smith. There's always got to be a Ryan somewhere in the Oilers organization, right? Stuart Skinner, he's young, but I think what we saw with him in his very brief appearance with the Oilers this year is he needs some work. I cannot argue from seeing that game against the Ottawa Senators that Skinner is at this point NHL ready, unless that was just a bad night. May very well have been a bad night. 32 and over, not a lot of names on this list, meaning a lot of the guys are in their prime. James Neal, there's been talk about whether or not he gets bought out. Chris Russell, who has a 1-year extension. I think they signed that extension for expansion exposure reasons. Mikko Koskinen hasn't lived up to that contract thus far. And Mike Smith, who again is a UFA. So both of their goaltenders, 32 and over, and one of them on their way out the door, and the other one not living up to that contract right now. So there's a lot of reasons to be concerned when it comes to the goaltending with the Oilers, when it comes to their depth. And on the blue line, I think there's questions there as well. Now, if Bear can bounce back from what was an off-season for him, and if Clefbaum can be healthy for training camp, you completely change the narrative on that blue line. But for right now, there's some question marks, and there's some concerns you would have to have if you're an Oilers fan regarding that team. So we'll get into the top scorer part of this. Connor McDavid, obviously the top scorer during the regular season, 56 games played, 33 goals, 72 assists for 105 points. Now, the remarkable buzzkill with the season that Connor McDavid had is he was not their leading scorer during the postseason. That's Draisaitl. 4 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. McDavid had 4 points in 4 games, and if you're Winnipeg before the series and somebody said, hey, you're going to hold McDavid to a point a night, their answer would be cool, because, again, with the lack of scoring depth for the Oilers, that means you're probably going to win the series, and that's what ends up happening. So while everybody wants to talk about McDavid and he's a failure, I've seen a lot of it, and I don't get it, because McDavid was out there busting his backside for all 4 games. He played a ton of minutes. He had a lot of opportunities. A, Hellebuck robbed him, and B, you need somebody to back him up. You have to have the depth, and I think we've seen it again in these playoffs, and maybe someday, when we get to a playoff time, I'll start being a little more, okay, this team has more depth, so I'm taking this one, even though the other team's a huge favorite. It's a blind spot a lot of us have, and I think we just, get enamored with their record. McDavid's numbers, 105 points in 56 games, historically great season, right? And then in the postseason, it really is a different beast. We talk about it, but it is. It is a completely different animal to try to score points and get wins in the postseason than it is in the regular season. Some teams don't have the ability to get over the hump. And again, for Ken Holland, he's got to figure out how to get there. Their top goaltender, it's the same during the season as in the postseason. It's Mike Smith for both. 21-6-2 was his record, 923 save percentage, 2.31 goals against. Mike Smith had a mostly excellent season. Mike Smith was re-signed, and there were a lot of people who weren't happy that he got re-signed by Edmonton. But his regular season numbers were great, and in the postseason, he was still pretty good. He's 0-4, but a 912 save percentage, a 2.40 goals against average. Honestly, Mike Smith was not to blame for them getting swept in the first round. Was Hellebuck better? Well, yes, but I think really it comes down to the fact that Winnipeg could roll 4 lines and has an underrated blue line to go along with Hellebuck. And for the Oilers, it really does become that top-heavy argument. Any part of this we look at. So their last 5 seasons, we've talked about this year, 35-19-2, losing in the first round, swept by Winnipeg. Last year, qualifying round, they were 37-25-9 going into that. From, at the pause, they were 37-25-9. Qualifying round, they lose to Chicago 3 games out of 4. Chicago, it was experience, it was comfort, it was playing without any pressure. Chicago beats them and knocks them out. Crawford was fantastic in that series as well. The prior year, 35-38-9, they don't make the playoffs. The year before that, they also don't make the playoffs, 36-40-6. 2016-2017, a year I remember is when this channel started to really grow. The Anaheim series was a little bit controversial at the end there. They were 47-26-9 during the regular season. They lose in round 2 against Anaheim and the dastardly Ryan Kesler in 7 games. For the Oilers, it's been a while. They're looking back to 2006 now when they wore this jersey in these colors, and thinking, hey, that was a pretty good time. I do hope at some point in time they do a throwback to these colors and this little guy on the shoulder. Some kind of a throwback. I don't anticipate it happening, but I think it would be nice. But anyways, yeah, so the last 5 years have been mostly disappointment if you're an Oilers fan. And yet, all of this time with Connor McDavid wanting more. Connor McDavid wants to win the playoffs. He'd like to win a championship. And it's all these nice things about, he'll eventually win a Stanley Cup. You have to be on a team that's good enough to win a Stanley Cup. There's a long list of great players that never win a Stanley Cup because they don't have a team around them that's good enough to win it. This is not a league where you can just have one guy and go, all right, there's your Stanley Cup. The exception to that rule being a goaltender. There are times where just having the right goaltender means you are automatically a contender, but the Oilers aren't one of those teams either. So their best contracts, they honestly have some that aren't too shabby. Draisaitl, $8.5 million a year until 2025. I remember at the time that was signed, people said, that's a ridiculous amount of money for Draisaitl. Who's laughing now? Darnell Nurse at $5.6 million for 1 more year. You know what? With the amount of time he played, I'm going to go ahead and say that per minute, his pay's not too shabby compared to some of the others on this team. And Klefbom. And Klefbom, there's the asterisk of he needs to be healthy for this contract to be a bargain. But $4.167 million for 2 more years, as long as he comes back healthy, that could be huge for that blue line. I don't think you can overstate what it does for that blue line. They don't beat Winnipeg if Klefbom's in the lineup, but they give him more of a fight, and maybe they win a game with Klefbom on the blue line. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Do you bring back Barrie? Do you bring back Larson? Do you pay the amount of money you're going to need to bring them back? Or do you save that money and spend it elsewhere? Sometimes the smart GMs are the ones that keep players. Sometimes the smart GMs are the ones who know when to let guys go and bring other guys in. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Oilers do in the offseason. I would have put McDavid up as one of the best contracts, but honestly, at $12.7 million, it's a substantial amount of money. Yeah, he's the best player in the league, but I don't think his contract's outside too great or too low. I think it's a pretty accurate contract for what he does for the team. Yes, he could get more money, but there aren't very many players that actually sign for league max at the time that their contract's up. There are players that could, and they generally are well regarded when they don't take league max. But it'll be interesting to see how this all works out. So if you're an Oilers fan, how does this get fixed? Again, to me, it's a matter of add depth, which for us as fans, it's easy for us to say. It's much harder to do that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video, and hey, Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.